All right. Hello. Welcome to Lunch and Learn. I see you are in the chat or in the group so far, Chris. I did get your pre-submitted question for the day, so we will start with that. We'll just give it another couple minutes just in case anyone else is going to be joining for the day, and then we can get started. All right. I think it's good enough for us to go ahead and get started. Like I said, we've got one pre-submitted question for the day so far, so we will start with that. But if anyone else in the chat has other questions, please feel free to uh, post them in the chat or the Q&A, and we can do our best to answer them. Um, so with that, we will start with our first pre-submitted question, which comes from Chris. So he says, previously I was warned that the pause flow step should be preferred over the delay next step. However, in a support ticket, they suggested using the latter to avoid our current trouble with the former. So some preferring to use the delay over the pause instead. So does the delay next step still have any concerning side effects? Chris, I'll give you the opportunity to speak if you have anything to go further into this. Otherwise, we can talk about some things if you are good for that.
Well, I have in my notes that delayed next step can be problematic if we use it. And so that's where I have in my notes, the better thing to do is to use the pause flow step. Now we are running on release 8.16, and I noticed that the step information for that, then the step information for pause flow steps, it calls out that this has its own issues. What I observed and what got me there is I observed that I had flows that had reached the pause flow step, but then they never restarted. The appointed time came, they didn't restart. Hours later, they're still there. And so that looks like perhaps there's a correction in release 8.17, which is not available to me today, so that might inform why maybe I should consider delay next step. But that brings me back to, well, what is our concern with delay next step? And why can you remind me why I might not want to use it?
Yeah, sure. So the biggest thing is the concept of threads and queues. Are you familiar with that, at least like at a base level, or
Yes.
no? Okay. So the delay next step doesn't really do anything with that, right? It's saying like this is your one flow, this flow is one running, and it's just gonna wait on this same exact thread, no changes there until the amount of time has passed, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
by itself is, not really easy to configure because you have to pick a static number of seconds. Um, and that's also like a small part of why this is, a little bit inferior to pausing a flow is, it's not as configurable because it's incredibly static. But also it doesn't push anything to another thread. It doesn't change any of that, like unless you were to put this in like a run flows for list or some kind of, something like that, but that probably wouldn't really do much use. And so because of that, if you have anything else, the rest of your flow or other flows that are waiting in that thread to continue, then it's going to have to wait for this delay next step. And the longer that this delay next step is, the more problematic that can be because you'll have a number of processes, even if you're not realizing or it's not intentional, you may have a number of processes that are waiting on this to complete before it can do anything else. Whereas the pause flow step will push it to a new queue Obviously the 8.17 update that you were talking about allows you to specify that thing so you can make your own new queue if you need to, or you have a specific place for it, you can do that as well. And it's more dynamic, but because it pushes it to a new queue, that allows it, other things to keep running and may not cause that interference. So that's probably why this pause flow tends to be, um, you know, pushed as maybe better because of the configurability and the fact that it pushes it to another queue to run, so that it hopefully doesn't cause any issues. Does that
So
help a little bit?
with delayed next step, it invites the problem of a queue running out of threads because you have this moment where all its threads are actually sitting on a delayed next step.
Hmm.
And because then the queue is starved for threads because they're all being held, nothing's getting done.
Correct. Yeah, and that's
Oh,
that's the major risk with this, right? If it's I think it's better used in like very simple scenarios, right? You want to delay a little bit before you start something or delay a little bit before you send an email. Whereas if you need some long process pause, that's where the pause flow can be. Um, and then something else this just may be worth testing, especially if you're not ready to upgrade to 8.17. Because again, if 8.17 solves your issue, I think that's perfectly fine. But another one that I actually had a suggestion from a colleague on is using assignments. They actually say they suggest this in a lot of cases. So if you use an assignment and it's up to you if you want to convert this to make it be something that someone can go ahead and complete to start your process early if you want, and build your form. But if you use an add task step with assignments, in the assignment setup category, you actually have this ability to specify extra dates. So you can set this assignment to, send a warning to the user that, hey, I need you to complete this if they didn't complete it in a certain amount of time or whatever. But there's also an expiration date that you can set on the assignment. And this may do something similar to your pause flow, but maybe with a little bit more configurability. Something that's worth, I guess, just kind of testing. It's up to you. Um, but you can set when you want the assignment to expire on, computing in the future or selecting from something that you've created in your flow, whatever you want that to be. Let's do like a 10-second expiration just to demonstrate this real quick. And you'll see it actually added a pathway on my assignment. So then it'll say if my assignment is expired, it'll close that assignment out so it can't be completed anymore, and it's going to run it down this path. And then you can have that path go to wherever you need in your flows for running something. So if I go to complete this and I receive my assignment, maybe I don't do it, or I'm not intending to do it because I want it to wait a certain time, or maybe there's an option to start the process early, but maybe I don't start the process early. You'll see it'll, after that time frame passes, it'll automatically complete the assignment and then move it forward. And so if you're
and
having this issues with your pause flow, I don't know if this will help, but this is a suggestion that they say, because these, I think a lot of people are maybe a little nervous about them because of the way that it can, you know, build up your queues and threads and all that kind of stuff. Um,
well, I mean, delayed next step seems problematic because it's locking the thread, right?
yes. Yeah.
Now you're saying that this assignment does not lock the thread, but it,
No,
but
assignments
it,
work very similarly. I don't know the exact specifics to tell you right now, but it works very
sure.
similarly to the pause flow, where it'll push it to another thread once the assignment gets completed, I believe.
So, I mean, a background process should, I mean, a background process using an assignment strikes me as maybe not, maybe that can work, right?
Hmm.
Or because a lot of where some of this is happening would be happening, sort of like after there's a flow that got initiated by run flow, run linked flow async, right? So it's in
Hmm.
the background. Then we come to this assignment just to do a delay, which is sort of the suggestion, right?
Hmm.
And I guess the question becomes, does that release that thread to go do something else during this delay? You
I
would say that it
believe
does,
it does.
because it should be like the pause flow. And the only issue that I had with pause flow was when I was reviewing a system report, and I was noticing that I had flows that were at the pause flow step that were well overdue when they should have resumed.
Hmm.
And that was my tip off. I have a problem and I need to reconsider what to do. Again, it gets back to also potentially a problem that is addressed in 8.17 that I don't have.
Right. Yeah. So that's the best I have is this may like the 8.17 upgrade may very well just fix the issue because I don't know exactly without looking at your systems and doing like full tests, which hopefully the support team is able to do for you because I know you have that ticket out. Um, I'm not sure if there's other things that whatever queue is trying to run your pause flow is maybe also just overloaded for whatever reason or just busy and it can't
That's,
run it. So
well, this is,
maybe a new queue could help with
well,
that upgrade.
but I spotted the fault in dev, and it happened over the weekend when there was really, truly almost nothing going on.
Okay, interesting.
So a 16 core CPU should have been able to keep up with what little it had.
Hmm.
On the other hand, I couldn't understand why the process it was trying to run took literally 2 whole days. Um, so, but I think there's probably a different story there to consider,
Yeah,
not part of this question.
yeah, interesting. Okay. Yeah, I think that this is the best that I think I can do, unfortunately, just kind of throwing out some, guesses or suggestions to see uh what may be worth trying. Um Again, I don't know if that 17 upgrade will help or not with whatever it is that you're experiencing, because it seems odd that that might happen. But hopefully this maybe gives you at least something to think about, and hopefully support team will get back to you with a little bit further, deeper information on this.
Well, I think though the important thing you're telling me that is helpful is delay next step actually locks the thread compared to these alternatives, and that is where trouble begins.
Yes.
Thanks.
Mhm. Right. Sorry, there's a lot of stuff added to the chat when I was going through that. Just gonna take a look at that for the next question. All right, so basic idea is in version 9, are there the same options for importing and exporting? We updated our dev and don't seem to see that. And then the individual flows work fine, but when combined, it times out. Let's see. Steps. Okay. Smith, I'll give you the opportunity to talk, and then I'll see what I can do to further figure out your questions, or if Robert was able to help you in the chat.
Yeah, I think he tried telling me something. And yes, so the first question I had was regarding how to import and export. We updated to version 9 in development, and we would earlier see that my teammates would see that export import option, and we create files and then migrate it to another environment. Right now, we don't see that option. So has it moved to a different place, or are we doing anything different? We've always used projects with decisions. And when we, unfortunately, I think he requested snapshot, which I'm not able to copy. Sorry about that. I cannot copy it on the thing. But when I go at the project level and go to deployment, when I click on the import export option, that is not highlighted. So how can we export now if I want to migrate my code to another environment?
I can look at, I know that, hey, Smith, this is Robert.
Okay.
Jeremy was saying he doesn't really have a version 9. I can, Jeremy, if you don't mind, I can share my screen for a moment. We can kind of
Yeah.
explore it together and figure out where we're at.
Yeah, let's
No
do that.
problem at all.
Thank you.
So, all right. So in version 9, you're saying that in your actual project itself,
Yeah.
the import option is grayed out right here.
No, not that one. The import of like when you clicked on that thing, you were oh, I don't know if I see that one. Oh, let me check that. I meant the other option where you had, right, where you were showing me, and the import export was, I think that was mainly to do with file import export.
Mm-hmm.
I do see that import export what you showed me as you showed
Mm-hmm.
the import export, but where can I see the import export on top? Is it in more? Maybe that's
So
the mistake I'm doing.
it depends on, are you in the folder view over here, or are you
Yes.
in the, you're in the folder view?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so to import it into a project, the way that version 9 is going
Mm-hmm.
to, I'll see if I can pull up a tab while we're at it. Oh, I'll leave that pulled up. Give me one moment here.
Sure.
With version 9, everything is
Mm-hmm.
built into these projects. I know I have a good graphic if you give me 1 second to show you.
Sure. No problem.
Um, so you would need to, in order to import it would need to be into a uh, project itself. So if you are in this folder space, this is from
Mm-hmm.
importing from 8 to 9. You have projects and you have designer folders and
Correct.
you'll run flows.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to run the project, you would want it to be in an actual project itself. So you can make a new one. Say you had a project called, whatever your name of your project is, you can
Okay.
rename it and then import it. Once you have that made, you should be able to import it into this space because
Mm-hmm.
I found the graphic. Here we go.
Okay.
In 9,
Mm-hmm.
we are kind of simplifying down uh rather than having the circular dependencies. I think I have a good graphic for that too. Yeah, so in version 8 and earlier versions, it's like this image on the left
Mm-hmm.
where all your projects can speak together speak to each other by default, but we are moving towards this project-based dependency. And you can declare dependencies among projects, but in order to keep people more organized, by default, those dependencies are not declared. So you would need to actually make a project because in the previous versions, you have this big old ecosystem of designer elements and reports and flows and everything that you
Mm-hmm.
have, and they all kind of speak to each other. Whereas in version 9 and moving forward, we are keeping things more consolidated into like almost mini applications or full-on applications. Um, so you would want to, and again, when you are importing a project,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's going to stack them based on the previous settings, or it's going to put it in your folder view over here. Hopefully you can still see my screen. Um, but it's going to be in this folder view. Were you able to see the graphic I was just showing or no?
Yes, I
Okay,
can
okay,
see your screen.
okay.
Yes. So
Um,
from what
so
I
you,
understand, we need to create, sorry, I just wanted to make sure I was
mhm.
understanding. So what I need to do is create a project and put this folder, which is now under the folder structure, under this project.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is going to be like your actual working space.
Right.
In a similar, it's not exactly the same, but for an analogy sake, in version
Mm-hmm.
8, you had Designer Portal and Designer Studio.
Mm-hmm.
You would need to, if you wanted to work on a project, you would need to be in the studio. And again, this is not a perfect analogy, but for now, if you want to work on your project, it has to be in a project. So,
Mm-hmm.
so now that I've done this, you can, put an icon, name it,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it will populate here in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
In this space, you should have the ability to import, export, as well as I do believe you can just move your project into a project. I don't have anything on this instance,
Okay, got it.
but
So you can
you
the
should be able to.
Okay, the whole folder can be moved inside the project, and then I should be able to do exactly what I was doing before.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
that is the functionality that I expect it to have. I
Okay.
don't have any a version 9 folder space because this is a fresh
Mm,
version 9, not a update or an upgrade. But
sure.
you should be able to right click and move it into one of these projects. But yeah, for and that might also address your second with the flows not working. Just because again, back to this kind of graphic,
Mm-hmm.
unless you declare what dependencies go with what project, you're probably going to get errors because they don't, by default, it's not going to know what projects go to what things because you might have a data structure that works in 5 different applications in your decisions instance. So you would need to go through and declare those dependencies. And you can do all of that here in this project through manage.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I do believe it is under.
Sorry, this is the project, right?
Yep, this is a project. Yep.
Okay. Okay.
And you can manage those dependencies in your manage folder, I do believe. Let me find the exact place for you. The dependencies dashboard
It's in
is
the info on the info tab. One of the
thank you.
dashboards.
Look at us. Thanks, man. The info tab. Maybe
Info
it's
tab.
yeah,
Yep.
perfect.
And then
Yeah.
it's one of the dashboards at the top you can choose from.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Jeremy. Yeah. So then you can actually say, hey, I want to make sure that we have access to certain things, just because that is the way moving forward to keep people, to keep projects more organized.
Okay. Great. So you think that could be the gateway error, right? That's
Yeah,
what.
that would be
Mm-hmm.
the first solution I would present to try and resolve it. The 504 can be a variety of things. I would
Mm-hmm.
say that um, it may not be that, just to be fully transparent, but in the same breath, it very may well be that. But
Okay.
this will be your first troubleshooting step is to make sure that all of that your project is actually a full-on project, not just
Okay.
information in a folder,
Mm-hmm.
and to make sure that it has access to the dependencies it needs to. Because you might have, like let's say you made a data structure in project A, but you're utilizing that same project data structure in project B. When your
Uh,
application runs and it tries to access that information, it can't access it.
um, I think right now since we are in the folder structure,
Mhm.
everything is probably in that folder, but definitely for exporting, we will try the project, putting everything there. But even if it is in the same folder, you think this is a possibility. Like we have to try to put it under the project and see if the 504 error goes away. But
Mhm.
we can try that. But it's all in the same folder as of now.
And I would also recommend if you do run to that 504, just a good troubleshooting step as well.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say hypothetically, I know that one of these has something in it. Uh, so let's say you wanted to run a flow. Um,
Mm-hmm.
turn on if you are still finding the 504 error, you can turn on this global debugger
Mm-hmm.
by clicking the gear and turning it on. I'll have to close out of this. Give me 1 second. It opens in a new tab so that when you go to run one of your flows, it'll give you maybe potentially more information in your global debugger.
Mm-hmm.
Mine currently is not loading, but yeah, about maybe why that 504 error is occurring.
Sure. Yeah.
And that would
Mhm.
be helpful too.
Okay, I'll do that. And like if we have, sorry, I coming to this thing, I think in one of the other calls that asked you about timeout, I was trying to look at it in our, we have a couple of things combined, right? We have a couple of flows combined to
Mhm.
create a bigger one. If we are running into the timeout issues, where can I set the timings? And what does that, async mode mean? I tried reading that in the documentation, but I don't know if I understood that correctly.
Yeah, so I mean, and Jeremy, feel free to fill in some gaps if I'm not hitting this right on the head. But
Mhm.
the two big columns you're going to run into are
Mm-hmm.
synchronous and asynchronous.
Mm-hmm.
Synchronous just means, let's say you're running a large task, or you're running run flows for list, or you're doing any of these things where you're iterating through.
Mm-hmm.
Synchronous is going to wait until that entire process, all the records have been gone through. Whereas async, it'll give you a thread, and it's kind of what they were talking about earlier. It'll give you a thread count and a timeout ability, and it will only process a certain amount of time, but it will allow the process to continue. So as a practical example, I might be able to pull up in a different version of where I actually have something set up like that. You can run something like this, maybe. So I do think that this one, and I apologize for all these ugly tabs, but we have this set up to synchronous. So for this particular run flows for list, this is going to iterate through an entire list of information and assess things individually. It runs this flow on every item in the list,
Mhm.
which is kind of an ugly flow. But we have it set up synchronous. So this step will not continue until it has gone through every single record. So if I import 30,000 records, it is going to sit and wait for me to import 30,000 records. Whereas if I do
Mhm.
something like async and wait or asynchronous, any of
Mhm.
these other jobs, and again, Jeremy can fill in, you are given the options to decide how many threads you're going to utilize and how many you're going to run at a time. But for the timeout settings, that might be
Mhm.
something. Jeremy, are you familiar with that? The timeout settings?
Yeah, I think the timeouts depend on a number of things. Sometimes it even is just dependent on like computer things. Um, like I know in our training containers, the timeout settings are a lot more strict than they
Mhm.
are like, if I were to just run something on, my computer right now versus running some certain things on our training containers, things are a lot more limited, but that's purely based on, the computer side of things that we have set up in our containers because we don't want things to be, too taxing to the couple hundred people that we have going through training at the same time. Yeah, I'm not as familiar with any of this like within decision specifics to um, any timeout options. I know sometimes steps have that configurability on them, but I'm
And
not 100%
Yeah, that's
sure.
what I meant. I think one of you, I couldn't figure in the flows I saw, I couldn't figure it out, but I'm not sure. One of you had shown that to me somewhere in one of these calls, and when I tried our flows, I couldn't get that thing where it was not at the query level, but we could adjust the timeout, like from whatever that 30 to a 40 or something like that.
do you,
And
do you know what steps had that setting? And I don't mind exploring it with you.
I don't remember in one of the previous calls I attended here, but I couldn't figure that out. Like when I was doing it on my own, I couldn't figure that out. It was one of the steps where one of you had shown me that you can probably change the setting.
I'll look through our previous questions
Sure.
really quickly.
sh-
I have a
sh-
list of every question that's ever been asked. So
Okay, that would be probably sometime last week, I think. But otherwise, sometime if there was a setting like these on the right, the property setting. So
Mhm.
in one of those, it's definitely not a query, it's a step. If we can get
Mhm.
to it, that'll be, if there is an option that I want this flow to run for a longer time, something like that.
Let me, I'm going to hop up and ask somebody real fast. So, Jeremy, while you're exploring, I'll be right back.
Yeah, sure. While he's doing that, I did get my version 9 up, and I'll just show you real quick if you didn't see. So like if you have all of your projects and everything, when you're in this folder view,
Mm-hmm.
and you right click, there's actually under
Mhm.
manage, there should be a projects category, and you can actually move folder to project.
Oh, perfect.
So as long as you have a project, so create a project first if you don't have
Mhm.
any yet,
Mhm.
move a folder to project, and then you get to select an existing project. Oh, actually, it
Oh,
looks like you can make a new project
new
from here too.
project. Okay,
So
great.
if you haven't even made one yet, you should be able to just create one from here,
Mm-hmm.
fill out your info, and then it should move that folder into the project, and then you'll see it in there.
Okay.
Then
Okay.
that'll allow it to be usable. So it's pretty easy to move.
Perfect. I'll do that. Thank you so much. That's very
Yep.
helpful.
Another option too, just to go a little bit further into the asynchronous stuff,
Mm-hmm.
is there's a type of subflow called start linked flow async,
Mm-hmm.
that you can force whatever you want, like whatever information from an existing flow or whatever flow you want, you can put it into this start linked flow async step.
Mm-hmm.
And this will allow this flow to run on a separate thread, or something separately from what your main flow is running. So if you have some process that it doesn't matter when it's completed, you know, like the idea here is there's no outputs from this step, right? This
Mhm,
outputs a tracking ID so you can keep track of the flow that it's running. But if
mhm,
you have something that's like, you know, sometime maybe it's just simply like saving data to a database or sending out a batch of emails where it doesn't really matter what comes out of it, you
mhm,
can put that stuff in a start linked flow async subflow, and it'll do all of that outside of the rest of this main flow. So then it doesn't matter, you know, whatever else you have running here, all of that will be completed. Then it'll hit this flow
mhm.
and then push that to a different thread and start completing those things separately, and then just automatically continue working through the rest of this flow. Doesn't matter when this flow finishes or the information that's happening in this flow, as
Mhm.
long as it's okay that you don't need any outputs or it doesn't matter what happens with this stuff, it'll basically just run everything as if this isn't even in the flow.
Okay.
Almost. It'll just say, okay, run this step, start this on the back end, and then continue the rest of my flow. And depending on what you're trying to do with your timeout stuff, that may
Mhm.
also allow you to do some things. So
Sure. I'll try that. But in case if I have to send you if we are not able to solve the timeout issue, and then if I have to send you a code, how can I send that export to you? Is there an email I can send that to you, or what should I do?
yeah, if you keep experiencing this,
Mhm.
the best place will then to be go to support@decisions.com.
Okay.
Since that's just more directed to your team's projects.
Mhm.
The support team should be able to jump on that, and they'll have
Okay.
experts that'll be also more familiar with the errors, and then you can, you know, send exports of your projects and further information so that they can, you know,
Got you.
dive
Mhm.
further into it than we have time for on Lunch and Learn.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Sure. I'll do that. I'll basically open a ticket, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Got
and
it.
I'm going to send you one more thing. I'm going to show you one more thing as well that might help you.
Sure.
If you, do you mind if I share my screen for one moment there,
Yeah, go
Jeremy?
ahead.
If you are looking for information about what you can send to them,
Mhm.
I can email this to you as well.
Sure.
But one of the first things that they'll ask for, am I sharing the correct screen? Yeah, cool. Is you can just submit your logs with your
Mhm.
support ticket.
Okay.
I can email this to you, but it's in your C folder.
Mhm.
And it's going to be C program files, decision server. And if you send that log folder, it'll give them
Mhm.
more information about what the issue is as well. So
Okay.
that would help you as well. So you can send that entire folder with your support ticket and they can kind of look through it and see where those errors are directly.
Okay, got it. So basically, when I run the flow, it would be captured the most recent flow and then send those logs, because otherwise it'll be so huge, right? Because if we have a lot of
Correct.
others doing it. Yeah. Okay,
Correct.
got it.
And I'll email this to you.
Sure. Thank you so much.
No problem.
All right. Do we have any other further questions for the day? Anyone else? Anything we need to address or we can discuss?
And I just sent that email for you. It's fine.
Oh, sure. Let me check.
Yeah, it'll just be one moment, but
Sure.
it just
Got it. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Well, I think everyone knows if you have any other further questions, please feel free to join the rest of this week. We've got Robert leading a couple of these and Jared this week as well. So we'll do our best to answer your questions. And if you need anything else, feel free to reach out. Thank you all for watching and joining. Thank you, Rob, for jumping in and assisting. And we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.